Don't let it freak you out. You don't have to memorize this stuff. Okay? It's still retained earnings. It's just a little more numbers added to it. Okay, so here we've got September 27th of 2009. We've got October 3rd of 2010. Here's our balance sheet as it relates to our stockholders' equity section. We've got common stock, authorized, 1.2 million shares, issued and outstanding, 742 and 742.9 shares. So basically, this shows the common stock out there. It's only at 0.001 cent a par value. That's not much, is it? Then we've got all the additional paid-in capital where what most of the money is. Then we've got a piece here of other additional paid-in capital. We've got our retained earnings that we saw earlier of how all this can go, okay? Then we've got all of our accumulated other comprehensive income we just talked about, total shareholders' equity, and then there might be some non-controlling interests of maybe some other companies. We really don't control those companies, but we really have a relationship with them because of the interest that we have within the company. And so what they're trying to do is help us see the big picture of how we are really linked with other companies. Okay? That's something Enron tried not to do, and they kept bad things off their balance sheets. Well, they're requiring us to show where we have interests. They want to see where the relationships are with our total equity. Again, guys, just a stockholders' equity section, just more pieces to it. Okay? The shareholders' equity and related changes. So here we've got, again, the way we're spelling it out, as of September 28th, we're just showing, again, the breakdown like we had in the other slide, how we've got it broken down, our earnings, our unrealized gains, translations, all the various amounts, and then we go into our retained earnings of the various losses and stock options, and we come up with a balance as of 2010. Same concept, we're just taking the information from various sources. And our job here is to try to determine where we put various aspects and what we record in the stockholders' equity section. How many shares of treasury stock were acquired in 2010? At what average price were they acquired? During 2010, Starbucks acquired 11.2 million shares of treasury stock at an average price of $25.50 a share. So if we go back here and look at our treasury stock, exercises stock, treasury stock, sale of common, balance, net earnings. Trying to find where that is. Sale, exercises stock. Well, maybe it's going to show us here. What was Starbucks' other comprehensive income? Ending 2010's balance in accumulated other comprehensive income? Well, we got to go back here to figure out what was their other comprehensive income. Other comprehensive income, 48. It started with 48.4 million, and it ended here with 57.2 million. Am I wrong? 57.2 million. So basically, what we just have to do is the Starbucks financial statements they're showing there, they're just wanting us to identify where we can find that extra information. What were the total dividends declared? The total dividends declared were 267 million, because in 2009 no dividends were declared, but in 2010 267 million dividends were declared. How many shares of common stock were issued for stock option compensation? Well, it's in here somewhere. Don't worry about it. I really don't care. The primary components of net income are income from continuing operations. That's the reason we're in business, right? Continuing operations. Results from discontinued operations. You know how when we create a financial statement, those operations that are now ending, we've got to put that on a separate line item. Don't freak out. We'll go over it, okay? Then, extraordinary gains or losses. This might be due to unique situations. Unique sales of things, losses due to acts of nature, right? Like, let's say Katrina. Don't you think when Katrina hit and there were various things, think about British Petroleum. What happened with all of the British Petroleum? You think those were extraordinary losses with there? It wasn't in the normal course. I mean, it was in their normal operations, but boy, their oil spill was a doozy, wasn't it? Corporations are required by GAAP to report earnings per share information on its income statement. So guys, we did all that work and we still have more work to do? Yes. We just want to know what all that means broken down by share. That's all we care about. So we use this ratio to come up with it. We take the price divided by this earnings ratio, which means the market price of the common stock divided by the earnings per share, the number of shares out there. And the way we are going to determine these number of shares is we're going to kind of weigh them all. Weigh the different stocks and totally what the equivalent earnings per share or number of shares of stock are out there. When using earnings per share information for intercompany comparisons, a user must be sure that calculations are comparable. That is something that is important in accounting, so we can compare within the industry and between industries, right? Or between years, actually. There are two types of corporate capital structures: simple structures and complex structures. So basically, a simple structure is needed in recording earnings per share. We take the net income, we subtract out those dividends, preferred dividends we know get the money. After that, we divide it by this weighted average. So I think what I want to do right now is kind of pause and start working at something. Determining this weighted average is actually easy. This is a good example. Let me do this and then we'll do a problem. But let's say this particular company starts the year with 15,000 shares. Then they purchase or issue 2,700 more shares on March 2nd. So the way you do a weighted average is 15,000 shares are for the whole year, aren't they? This 2,700 shares started in March are actually times 10 months. Then in July, they issued another 3,300 shares. They were in existence for how many months? 6. And then in December 1st, it acquired 600 shares, so that's a subtraction. So the way you can really do this, you see how in January and February, you had 2 months of 15,000 shares. And then from March through June, we added some shares in March, so we increased our shares. We had those for 4 months. Then in July through November, we added more shares. And then in December, we subtracted some shares. So we kind of weigh them based on how many months we had at a certain level of shares. It's not hard to do. We'll go through a problem. So let's kind of stop. Because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired of listening to myself. So let's start with a problem.